Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Playing with Cast Iron Toys, because that's essentially what we're doing here. Recently, I was lucky enough to acquire this cast iron pig mold, and what this actually is a mold for shaping brawn or head cheese. These pig heads are rather popular among cast iron collectors, but I'm determined that all of my pieces be users and not just for display. And so I took the time to contact a local butcher and order a pig head for making old-fashioned brawn or head cheese. Before taking it home, I asked the butcher to cut the head into quarters, and that way I won't have to struggle to cut it open myself. And also, with the head cut up like this, well, it doesn't look so scary now, does it? It's just meat. Now, you don't even need an actual head to make head cheese. You can use any part of the pig, and in addition to this head, we also have some pig's feet, which we're going to be adding. If you don't feel like you can deal with a head, you can certainly use regular pork shoulder and prepare this dish in exactly the same manner.
Preparing this dish definitely taught an important lesson. The spices that go into the meat are every bit as important as the meat itself. This was discovered at the beginning as we cut up basic mirepoix vegetables to boil with the pork. After cutting up the vegetables into large pieces, we added the pig's feet and placed the cut up pig head into the pot. All we had to do now was boil this for several hours. These are your basic vegetables and spices, but when these aromatics boiled with the pork for several hours, the kitchen had a wonderful fresh smell and not the heavy stench of boiling meat that you might expect. The boiling meat caused a nasty-looking foam to accumulate on top of the water. This is just extra fat, and it can be skimmed off with a strainer. You can skim the scum off every half hour or so. After 6 hours, the meat was falling apart, and the bones were pulling out easy. It was time to take this out of the pot and start sorting through the meat. The meat was falling apart when it was moved into a separate bowl. Once we'd salvaged everything we could, next up, we strained the broth into a large container. The pot was quickly washed out, and then the broth was strained back into the pot. From here, we brought it to a boil and let it boil for about an hour to reduce it into a thick stock. While the liquid was boiling and reducing in the pot, we took the time to sort through all of the meat and separate the bones and extra fat and pieces from the actual meat. The end result was a surprising amount of meat. There must have been at least 3 or 4 pounds of good pork taken from this pig head. At this point, I'd like to give some advice based on this experience. If you want to make this dish, be bold. Use your favorite spices for pork, and most importantly, use lots of it. This is your dish, and you can use whatever spices you want. Once the pork was ready for adding the spices, I ended up adding some basic spices. Then I went back and added a lot more spices. The first time the spices were added to the pork, the end result tasted good. But after adding even more spices, this suddenly brought this to a new level, and this pot of pork was transformed into something truly amazing. You won't believe what a difference it made to kick up the spices in this dish, and I can only encourage you to use lots of your favorite spices for pork. You really won't regret this. And now we bring out the cast iron pig mold. The mold was covered with plastic wrap to keep the brawn from sticking when removed from the pan, and as much meat as possible was scooped in, and some extra pig glue, that would be the stock broth with lots of fat in it, that was added to the pan. This was all wrapped in plastic, and a cast iron pan placed on top to press it down. There was enough brawn, in fact, to fill a second pan. For the second pan, I used a mini ham boiler cast iron pot, maybe 8 or 9 inches long. And so the 2 pans full of meat went into the refrigerator, where they settled all evening and all night to solidify. And after chilling in the refrigerator overnight, the liquid had hardened to produce the original cold cut. Our head cheese was ready to be served.
Man, is this ever good. You won't believe how delicious this is until you make it yourself. The best advice I can give is to be bold when adding your spices to the meat and use a lot of it. Without the spice, this has a good pork flavor because the head actually has some of the best meat on the entire pig. But adding the spices really brings this up to 11 and takes it to an entirely new level. And if you want to really gross your friends out, but in a good way, tell them this is pork, but don't tell them what it really is until they're done eating it. All I can say is I'll be making this again when the holidays come around as a very special dish. And once you've tried this, I think you'll agree this is a culinary delight that you really won't want to miss. Thank you for watching.